Tammy, maybe you'd like to.
Yeah, I guess I'm having a little trouble with the phrase theory of everything.
Right.
If I think about what that would mean for science, it's a huge order to try to just come up with a theory that can take the various forces and explain them in one concept or so forth. I find to come up with a theory of everything for science is going to mean a lot of detail of how one idea then one concept leads to these various phenomena that are currently being discussed and trying to be joined in one theory of everything. So I'm a little concerned with calling this concept a theory of everything at this point. I find it an intriguing idea to think about what would a metaphysics look like with potential as sort of the driving force or a dynamic force through all things. And that's an interesting idea, and I'd like to see how that would play out. But at this point, until it can't be called a theory of everything until it's done that work. And so the closest thing I can think of, for instance, it's a very different principle, but attempts to do something similar, as we've discussed, is Spinoza's conatus principle. It's a very different principle, but it tries to explain how all, a 17th century attempt, tries to explain how all individuals, whether living or non-living, come to behave in the way they do, and then it not only explains this principle of conatus, but goes on to explain how that is the driving principle behind the laws of physics as are understood at that point in time, how that principle is a driving force behind human emotion, and it spends 2 books of the ethics trying to explain how that's the case. So it tries to take that principle and then apply it and flesh it out and show how it reaches out in these various areas. So until that detail, and I know you talked about metaphysics being sort of fancy or so forth, but until I see that detail, I don't know that theory of everything is a statement that makes sense to me. I find it a very interesting hypothesis of a dynamic principle to consider, but I'm not sure yet I feel comfortable with the phrase theory of everything.
If I were a scientist, I would not devote 1 minute of laboratory time to this theory. But if I were a scientist, at coffee afterwards, with my colleagues, I might say, by the way, what do you think? 100, 200 years from now, might we get to the point that we can look at this? Or is there anything in our work so far which contradicts this? And just keep it in mind on the side. By the by, this is interesting. So this is not meant to direct the scientific community, God forbid. Science is sort of generally incremental advance, and they're going at warp speed as it is, and it's incredible what's been achieved in my lifetime. It's truly unbelievable. It is truly unbelievable, the brilliance and genius of the scientific community to have gotten to us to this point so far, so fast in my own lifetime. So they're going at warp speed as it is, and I'm coming at it sort of, from a different direction. And I'm not saying, put down your pencils and microscopes. By the by, keep it in mind, at the coffee clutch later. It's more meant for the world at large, to examine as a potential all-embracing theory. With regard to Spinoza, I know you're a student of Spinoza, and very few people can say with conviction they understand Spinoza, exactly what he meant. And as far as his underlying interlocking network, I have a parallel interlocking network, so there's no dispute. But that's not what's driving my theory, my hypothesis. It's part of my hypothesis, but it's not driving it. It's like the netting, but it's not the guts of it. So, no argument that, if you want to interpret Spinoza's interlocking network to be parallel to my interlocking network, it'll be my guess. But I'm afraid to say anything about Spinoza because, try as I might, I'm never quite sure I really understand fully what he's saying. And I'm not sure he did, by the way. And as a postscript, Bruce Chilton, Gary Hagberg did not invite me here and to have a conference about my 2 books because I'm playing it safe, or because I'm a famous academic, because I'm not, or because I've proven every last iota of the theory because it's only a theory. I suspect they invited me here because they probably had similar questions when they were younger or over the years.
And older.
Right. and looking for an embracing theory which at least can be used as a working proposition. That's what we're talking about, a working proposition to be looked at or attacked or replaced, or maybe as one of a number of potential working propositions as for context. And they did not go on a limb here with their credibility and Bard's credibility, because, I wrote a paper. They went on a limb here for only one reason, that I might be right. And that's why we're here tonight.
Let me follow that. At the close of an introduction to Volume 2, David, as a sort of quite charming, I found, letter to the reader, really, he closes it with a remark which I think is extremely telling about the entire project, and I want to ask you about that. He says one last thing. He says, to understand the infinite cosmos, one truly need not spend a lifetime peering through large telescopes or fathoming hyper-complex physics equations or wading through dozens of esoteric writings. Indeed, respectfully, they will not advance you beyond, say, second base. One needs, however, and here's what I want to ask you about, one needs, however, to attempt to listen very carefully to the very core of one's soul. And that project heard by any philosopher would give rise instantly to the question, well, does this run the risk of losing the distinction, as philosophers are quick to say, between the way something is and the way something seems? Because if we, in fact, listen to our own souls, and to take cases philosophers often discuss, the case of hallucination, if I, quote, listen to my own soul in the context of hallucinating, and, Tammy says, don't worry, there are no snakes there, you're just, it's something wrong, there's a big and very vitally important difference between what I sort of am believing in my own soul and what is actually the case. Does the criterion that you established there, beautifully put, does it run the risk of losing that distinction?
Well, as you're well aware, it's that one phrase that one needs to listen to very carefully to one's own soul.
Yeah.
So 90% poetic.
Yes.
And 90% of it is poetic, and 10% is reality. Mm-hmm. Meaning, obviously, you have to, so to speak, do your homework. In my case, I did, 20 years of trying to observe everything I saw, but I tried different filters over it. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, in retrospect, I develop in the book the idea that what's true on a personal level is due on a cosmic level, and vice versa. Yeah. That we mimic each other. And so, therefore, the clue to the cosmos will tend to be embedded in one's own soul. So it's not that I'm saying, look into your soul and write a book on metaphysics. Mm-hmm. When I wrote it, I was aware it's like sort of a dicey phrase. How far, people are going to take this out of context. That's all you need to do. It's like a poetic phrase, and by the way, the code is probably embedded inside your own soul, which I believe it is. I think if we, with equanimity, it would appear into our own soul, I think we'd hear it saying to us, quest for your own particular potential and try to maximize your particular mark on the earth. I think everyone in this room today, I think we ask ourselves, maybe not in those words, but are we doing what we can do to make a mark? Are we doing what we can do to maximize our play, to live somewhat meaningful lives? And that's not just to make the most money or to write the most articles. It's the whole cluster of things we do, meaning it's generally a combination of things we do, meaning advance academically, try to have some security, try to act decently with people, try to establish meaningful relationships, a whole cluster of trying to reach one's potential. Now, as we all know on this particular score, if you dilute yourself too much, you achieve nothing. And if you focus too much, then you're just you become sort of a dry individual. So potential is not one thing. It's your potential. It's your personal cluster package. So the idea that from this side of the table that these are good concepts to develop, sure, but that's not what we're here for. There are plenty of Tony Robbins things and things like that. How to maximize your potential, fine. But we're here for this is a blue chip conference at a blue chip college with blue chip chairman, blue chip roster of speakers. And we're here to advance the football a little bit. We've had some very dynamic, frankly, lunches where we had more sort of arm wrestling, like mano-mano, gladiator contest. And what I've learned a few
And dinner is still coming up.
And I've learned a few key things, and I'll say very quickly what I've learned. Number one, I have to say very clearly, this is not science. And I respect science, and I have no argument with science. In fact, science is my ally. Science is my ally and my friend. But this is not science. It may be 500 years from now, science will have the tools to deal with this, or it may be this type of concept is not classic scientific turf to investigate. I've also learned that people get very nervous about anybody should have a theory of everything, because we've sort of heard that before. But we also know, like, in life, you always say, well, should I pay attention to this one? This one might be right. So generally we say, no, I'm not going to waste my time on the next guy who says I have a theory of everything. But so, like, to echo the Passover Haggadah, why is this day different than other days? Because Chilton and Hagberg say, let's give it a look. So now we have to, and you have these world-class people who signed on, even though they may be highly wary of this thing. Nevertheless, they signed on this conference. So they're all saying on some level, of course we're wary, but we're willing to invest a little time in this. Okay?
Let me toss the ball to our participants. Perhaps any of the four of you here presently.
Yeah. I'm very pleased to hear you accept that it's not science, your
100%.
In fact, as I was listening, what it struck me as being is just a business school slogan. And I can see that business school slogans are perhaps very helpful for personal development. Each of us here may be trying to fulfill our potential, striving to do well and all that. I can see that business school slogans are very good for collections of individuals, teams, football teams. And I can see it's very good for corporations. But frankly, that's where it stops. And the fallacy in your approach is that you think that business school slogans apply to the cosmos. And I think that's frankly nonsense. We don't need slogans to understand. And I think it's a misrepresentation of what metaphysics is to resort to slogans. Metaphysics should draw on the information that science provides about the mechanism of the world and the insights it provides. It doesn't need to draw on the business world.
Let me ask Tammy to step in on that and then come back around to you, David, if I may.
Oh, why me?
I thought you had a lot to say on this particular point. But
No.
you don't have to.
Yeah, I'll let someone else take it.
Sorry.
It's okay.
David, go ahead.
That's all right. Wait, maybe we can take another question. I'll answer both together.
Oh, yes.
No, I mean from any of the three, and then I'll answer one or two together.
I'd be happy to.
All right.
Thank you. Thanks for mentioning our interest in your work, David. I thought I would locate that interest in my own case. Next spring, in exactly a year, I'll be co-teaching a course with John Ferguson, who is our professor of biology on evolution. And our purpose is to relate theological conceptions at the time that theories of evolution emerged, so that we can see how these correspondences play out. So as you might imagine, I'll be pressing Tammy later on for help on the bibliographical side. And conceptually, it seems to me that within an environment which aims to be interdisciplinary, that is a perfectly straightforward kind of question, along the lines that Bernhard suggested earlier on. But I have to say that at the back of my mind, and it will be at the back of my mind, not at the front, while I'm teaching the course, I'll have two questions which I came into this conference with, and I still have. I'll just pose the first of them now and get to the other one later on. The first I referred to in our initial meeting, namely just where we see that consciousness emerges, and then what relationship we believe that consciousness has to our physical reality. It seems to me that a consideration of metaphysics ought to elucidate that for me, and I have had the impression that we have approached answering that from time to time during this conference, and yet I don't quite have a takeaway as yet.
So, the whole field of consciousness, is a vast field before, and it's a vast field, contemporary writing. Consciousness is crucial component, both in book 1 and in book 2, in different areas. And I'll get back to Dr. Atkins as well. And consciousness, is an area of science for sure, and so I'm speaking on it as a layman. Okay. Now, my book deals with consciousness on 2 levels. In book 1, I posit that if there is a divine, the divine has to withdraw divine consciousness to allow for man's growth and freedom. Okay. And you touched on that in your opening remarks. Okay. And I told you I had to clarify that. Okay, so here we are. But in book 2 and partially in book 1, I say that development of consciousness is one of the primary quests for potential of the cosmic order. That's number 1. Number 2, I'm saying that the whole cosmic order is one great consciousness. I'm positing that is. I'm not the first one who posited something along those lines, but it's fully integral to this theory. So I have consciousness on all levels here, and so the emergence, to me personally, growth in consciousness is one of the most extraordinary phenomena that I observe on a society level, and I try to, frankly, do whatever I can to raise my own consciousness, just to be able to write a little better, to be more creative. And interrelated, you need a certain level of consciousness to sort of absorb what I'm trying to say here, because it is a new paradigm as far as we know. It might be wrong, but it's new. And you have to think in totally different terms than you've ever thought before. God is not there. If there's God, we're right in the middle of God. We're part of God. We're like a red blood cell as part of the greater divine. Meaning, while we may be infinitely minute, we're still there. We're part of it. And so consciousness is crucial. We're all in awe of the growth of consciousness. And at the same time, I'm saying we're all part of an extraordinary unfolding consciousness. Now, back to Dr. Atkins. First, let me say that we can handle all discussions on a fine manner without calling names. And it's beyond me why you keep doing that to all the speakers, but also with all due respect. You're high-level guys, so we can keep discussions on a high level. Usually I would not answer a person addressing me the way you did, but in the interests of the conference, I will. Let me set the record very clear there. I don't take nonsense from anybody. I don't care who they are. But I'm going to address your issues, the fundamental issues, not the name calling. Now, if one has a concept, one can right away tag it as some kind of slogan. You can tag it whatever you want. I have a concept. You want to brand it negatively as a team slogan, be my guest. I have a concept. I would say it's a divine, not my concept, it's the concept of divinity that is an eternal divine which quests for potential. And it drives everything. It drives humankind. It drives your expletive work. It drives this conference. It drives our desire to find love, to find friendship, to find security, to make a mark, to advance humanity, to make friendships, to take care of our children, to do our share in this world. So, I think it's a powerful concept, and I extrapolate what's generally a concept applied on a very down-to-earth personal level, like young man, reach your potential, I extend it to the entire cosmos as a potential overarching concept. And I think it works. Now, if one doesn't think it works, we can discuss how it doesn't work. So that's where I stand on that score.